Hi, welcome everybody. I'm Anna Duvendorf. I'm the marketing manager at Bambooster, and we're going to talk today. We have a couple experts from agencies, consulting businesses that are going to help us talk through finding and closing clients for your consulting business, your small agency. So the reason that we like to talk about these things at Bambooster is because a lot of the features in our product really facilitate small agencies and consultants well, client approval workflows, being able to toggle between different client projects really easily, setting up all those permissions and things like that. So we like to help everybody get their consulting businesses and their small agencies running as smoothly as possible, and you don't really have an agency until you have clients. So these three are going to help me out with this. We have Adam from Odd Dog. Beta is here on audio, and we're waiting just a moment for Robert from Curious Ant. So I'm going to let these three go around and introduce themselves and kind of where they come from, where their expertise comes from on finding and closing these clients, and then we'll kick off with the panel. So I'll kick it off to Adam first.
Yeah, well, Anna, thanks for having me. So my name's Adam. I'm with a marketing agency here in Seattle, Washington called Odd Dog. Weird name. Dogs are part of our culture. We just try to keep things fun and light. Been around and in business for about 13 years now, and have been through the gauntlets of like trying to build the agency, figuring out what our niche is, how we really talk about ourselves, and how to approach and build clients, and ultimately a business that has been really sustainable for us to run, especially through a pandemic, which was pleasant to see us kind of get through that relatively unscathed compared to other businesses that we know and work with. So excited to talk more.
Awesome. Veda, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Veda. I'm a freelance social media manager, and I've been in social media marketing for around 5 years now, but I decided to take the leap into freelancing, and I started working with a few clients at the start, and then obviously the pandemic hit, and I had to redo everything. Basically, I had to redo my website and regain clients that I'd lost because some of them were in hospitality and events. So I redid my website and started offering different services such as consultations to try and get some money in. And I've now been freelance for 2 years now. So doing social media management and marketing, ads, and business coaching as well. And
Awesome.
I'm from the UK, by the way.
Yes, and we very much appreciate you being here at your late hour, so we can do this
okay.
at 10 a.m. West Coast time. So let's see, do we have Robert on here? Robert, give me a shout.
I am.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Do you want to introduce yourself?
I will. Apologies, I'm having some issues with the webcam. Yeah, I've been in marketing for a long time. Prior to Curious Ant, I spent 6 years as the global marketing director, overseeing the photography for Oracle. And then when Oracle went through a reorg, I was approached by a team out of New York and London and said, "Hey, let's build an agency." And I said, "You're totally out of your mind. You don't build an agency overnight." And they said, "No, come meet with us, do this." And they convinced me, and we built and launched Curious Ant. And we launched just about 18 months ago. Got off to an amazing start. And then the pandemic hit. Our number one client when the pandemic hit was a company that issues travel credit cards for businesses and tracks business travel expenses. And we had just signed $1 million deal with them in the UK, and we were off and running. So the last 18 months has been a real adventure, and we've really learned a lot about how to pitch clients, but how to really market ourselves in a crisis.
Awesome. I love that. We might have to come back to that later when we talk about if it's important to diversify the industries your clients belong to. One quick piece of housekeeping that I want to mention is we are going to do a Q&A at the end. So if you have already come with burning questions that you know you want the panelists to answer, go ahead and type those in there anytime. If they mention anything throughout the panel, just keep those going on an ongoing basis. So that way when we switch to the Q&A, we've already got a bunch to work through, and we can talk about those questions as well. So the first thing I want to kick off with is a little bit of story time. We can start with Adam again. And I just kind of want to hear about one of the very first clients that you ever closed and where you found them when you first decided to branch off on your own. But what I'm really curious about is after you tell us how you did this, if that's the way you would do it again.
All right, well, a fun one for you. So one of our first clients was a software company based up in Vancouver, BC. They were probably about 150 person company. And we had gotten in through a partner that we know that brought us in initially just to do some SEO and some social media consulting. And I'm standing in the room with the CEO, and they're talking about a conference coming up in 6 weeks and how they'd love to have a new website for it. And asked us what would it take to redo their website in 6 weeks. And I threw out a number that I thought was going to be so big that there's no way he would say yes, because that's just a suicide project. And he said yes and shook my hand right there on the spot. And I kind of just freaked out for a moment before we took on this project. That's a website with integrations with 6 different systems done in 5 different languages, had to be launched in 6 weeks. And for every week we were late, we were docked $10,000 was our incentive to like make sure we really kept cranking on this thing. So we ended up launching that project the same night as Game 7 of the Stanley Cup, also happening in Vancouver. If you guys remember the Vancouver riots that happened up there a few years back, we were on the 14th floor downtown trying to launch a website on a deadline at midnight that night. So it was an interesting experience. Would I do it again? No. I guess the lesson to take away from that is, we went in with a partner, and it was a great partnership, but we ended up really kind of having to take lead on something that was bigger than what we should have taken on at the time. Like if I look back and I'm just being responsible about it, I say like that's probably not the best way to approach. We should have been a bit more buttoned up and a bit more honest with the client about what this is really going to take to make a project like that happen, and properly setting expectations.
Gotcha. Okay. As a lifelong Bruins fan, I really appreciate this story. For anyone attending and doesn't know, the Bruins played Vancouver in Vancouver for Game 7, and the Bruins were the ones that won the Stanley Cup, which is why the Canucks are rioting. So, a quick question about that story. So, you talked about a little bit about mismatched expectations. Is there anything that you felt kind of led to that in when you first got connected with them, your pitch to them, maybe your materials that that you would say would be something that you would want to make sure that you have on your website or in your pitch email, your prospecting email, that kind of prevents that sort of thing from happening? Or what are your thoughts there for kind of nipping off mismatched expectations in the bud when you're first starting these talks?
Yeah, I mean, at that point, it was a relationship sale. There was nothing that was going to be on our website or in any of our materials that would have changed. It was literally standing in an office and shaking hands. So I'd say the biggest thing there is knowing and understanding what your strengths are, what your limitations are. And, people will ask for the world and they'll even throw a bunch of money at something. But the reality is, doing a project like that in that timeline just was not responsible. And so it probably would have been better for us to have a conversation and say, this is crazy. let's walk back off this ledge a little bit and just say like, okay, what can we get done? Maybe there's a microsite we could have done just for the conference that could have gotten things set up and successful without people, there till midnight and freaking out. And, it launched well, but it could have been better.
Yeah, that's interesting to put out there, to make sure that people are kind of curious about that process of being realistic expectations, because we've actually had in these webinars and talking about this before, people saying, how do you have that conversation when someone's a bad fit? And it could be bad fit for any other reason, but we've had conversations about just charge them enough where they won't work with you. And then that's a real tactic some people use. So, I mean, I guess the lesson here is if you're going to use that tactic, you know, make sure that you're ready just in case it doesn't work, and maybe have a more long-term plan. So I want to kick this off to Robert next. A little bit of story time about where you found one of your first clients and how that process went for you.
Sure, and I want to pick up on something that Adam said, because we had a very similar experience but took the opposite tact, where we actually had a client early on come to us with a project that we thought was really unrealistic, and we were really clear managing their expectations, and in turn actually didn't get the project. And they went somewhere else. It was a complete disaster. But what we should have done was, I think what Adam pointed out, is like actually, rather than push them away, strategize with them as to what would be more realistic and what they could get. I don't know that that would have worked, but I think one of the things that we took away from that was we would have been better off getting in with this client, because they've never come back to us. And, you know, so if we had managed their expectations instead of pushing them away as much as we did, we might have been better off. But I would say our very first clients were very much the same. They were relationship sales. They were people who knew us and knew me and had worked with me. My very first client, Curious Ant, was the same company that had just reorged. Our first client was Oracle. You know, so the people that I had worked with knew me and knew that they had a project that they couldn't handle internally and didn't have the internal resources for, and came to us. So I would say that, and I would guess this is true about most agencies, when you're first starting an agency or any business, almost everything you do is built on your network and built on your relationships. The other stuff comes later. And I would still say we're still driven 85% by relationship and relationship management. I don't know that we've gotten really any business that has come to us that wasn't generated by the relationships that we have.
Nice. So when you kicked off Curious Ant, you're saying you're having these relationship meetings. How are they knowing that you are offering these services? Are you reaching out to your network and saying, I've started this agency, keep us in mind just in case? Are you looking for more specific use cases? How do they know to come to you even though they're in your network?
I think it's actually, you know, it's a multi-channel assault, right? You reach out to them and say, you know, you do your LinkedIn posts, you do your emails, you do all that stuff to say, hey, I know we're here. Prior to the pandemic, I had a lot of coffee. You know, hey, let's have some coffee. Let me tell you about what I'm doing. Do you have any holes in your workflow? Do you have any place, you know, where we can fit? And looking for that low-hanging fruit to open up those doors. Not saying no to something just because it's small, because that often opens up the doors to many other things. So it was really a matter for us of, and social media, right? We worked with our social media team that we brought on to really get ourselves out there, project an image, all that stuff that go, you know, channel building, all those things that go into building any kind of successful brand.
Gotcha. Awesome. Okay, I want to kick it off to Veda now about one of your first clients and where you found them and how you started that conversation with them.
Yeah, sure. So my first client wasn't how I'd normally go about getting a client now. At the time, I had just quit my job because I was really unhappy. It was a marketing job, and I decided that I wanted to leave. I left with nothing else coming in, and I was determined to get another job. However, I started looking into freelancing, and I was like, right, that's it. That's what I want to do. I want my own freedom. I want to be able to choose clients when I want to choose them and how I want to choose them. And I came across a Facebook ad for a job, and it was a local real estate agency, and they wanted a social media manager to sort their platforms for them, and they had about 6 platforms in total. So this client took up a lot of my time, and I went into the offices because I was quite close to them, and they hired me a week later, and that's how I got that's how I got my client, and I was working with them for about a year and a half before COVID hit, and I basically did the social media for them, and it was like having a normal interview, which is not what I would be doing now. Um, if I was to have a client meeting, I wouldn't have it in an interview style.
Yeah, that sounds a little in-house. That's funny.
Yeah, yeah, it definitely was.
That's funny. Okay, so I'll open this up to any of you guys who still do outbound prospecting. So, you know, kind of discounting that relationship stuff, LinkedIn messaging and emailing your current relationships. Do you guys still do cold prospecting? And where do you go to find those contacts? Anybody? I don't want to single somebody out if you don't do cold prospecting. Does anybody want to volunteer?
We've been doing a lot of it in the last few months, and I have a business development team that's been helping with that. They've gone through and they've identified companies that look like good fits for us, identified the people within those companies to do outreach to, and reached out on LinkedIn, reached out via email. If we get any response, we obviously follow up. We both reach out through our personal LinkedIn, and my biz dev team actually uses my personal LinkedIn on my behalf a lot of the time. And that seems to, it's generated no final sales yet, but we're in 3 or 4 different discussions right now that are moving quite well. And that's really the first cold prospecting we've done. And that started about 6 months ago. And I would say that, like I said, it's led to 3 or 4 conversations that are currently moving forward quite well. But it's really identifying the right companies and the right fits.
Does your team have a process for coming up with the criteria of what constitutes as a good fit or what you're looking for on LinkedIn?
Yeah, I think we're looking for a certain size company. You know, it's a small to medium sized company. It's a young company. It's a company that is growing, but doesn't necessarily have an existing relationship or a long-term existing relationship with an agency. We don't know that when we reach out to them, but we, you know, when we look and do that research on the company, we can say, wow, they've really grown a lot in the last 3 years. My guess is that their marketing team is small and really, you know, struggling to keep up, right? And or we can identify it by looking at what they put out there. Hey, that website is clearly a Squarespace template, and you know they probably need some help. So we'll look at that, and we look at companies that are growing. We also, because we have a lot of SaaS experience, we'll actually look at those SaaS companies because likely we know somebody or know somebody who knows somebody who can help us open those doors as well.
Yeah, I just want to recap that quickly for everyone listening because that was a really great, a little bit of a concrete list of things that you can look for, such as someone, you know, not having a really super well built out custom site, someone that's grown really quickly who probably has a small marketing team, or I guess probably you could even say if you could see who's on the team, you can tell their team is small. Those are some things that people attending with us today can look for that might indicate that their marketing team needs some help that you can offer. So that's some really great insight. What about you, Adam? Do you guys have a process for criteria you look for when you're looking to work with a client or pitch a client? And how did you come to decide on what that is?
Yeah, so to speak to the outbound piece, follow up on that real quick. We have done a lot of experimentation with some of the outbound marketing, and the trouble we ran into is that the marketing industry is just flooded with people out there also doing outbound marketing on it. And so after tries in a bunch of different areas, we just kind of realized like this just isn't our game, and most of the really good clients who come to us are coming inbound. So we focused on that, and we actually tried to figure out a way we can offer value to customers before they ever pay us a dime. And what we did is actually went out and developed an app to help businesses easily collect online reviews from their customers, just using an app and face-to-face asks of those customers. And that's been huge for us in diversifying our client base, both geographically and across industries, and giving us a way to work with someone, before they've had to pay us anything. It's been quite nice. As far as how we identify like where we are really good at, it just kind of naturally happened over time, to be totally honest. I wish there was some way that I could tell you like this is what we knew we wanted to be and what we wanted to do and went for it. We really have kind of come into working strongly with local businesses, and especially those with multiple locations. That's a weird little spot to be in, and it's kind of hard to explain to people. We can usually do it just based on letting people know like, hey, local businesses, so not a SaaS-based business and based on a certain size, usually does that trick. And so it took a lot of time to get there. We are still a bit generalist, and that will come in and work with these companies and help them on their entire marketing strategy and agenda. But that area of them knowing and having the confidence that, okay, but we're really going to be optimizing and utilizing our locations to their absolute fullest by using Odd Dog, sets us a little bit apart from the rest of the people that are out there talking to them.
Yeah, I think this is a really incredible idea to stimulate that inbound lead generation, is have something people actually want, and they give you that information to use it. So in your case, you had an actual tool. For people maybe on this call that don't have the resources to build something like that, I think this really could be anything. It could be a piece of gated content. It could be, for social media managers on this call, you could create an audit template, an audit spreadsheet that people can download and use. Really anything that you can kind of productize and use the lead gen tool, I think could work well with Adam's idea of, having something that generates more of that inbound stuff. So I want to kick it off to Veda as well, about where you go if you ever are trying to outbound prospect leads that aren't really in your network yet, and what you're looking for those people.
Yeah, so for me, I had a lot of trouble niching down at the start of my business, and eventually I got to the stage where I wanted to offer my services to creatives and small businesses. So people who have been doing it for a little while, but who haven't maybe got a marketing strategy yet and just need a little bit of extra help. So for me, where I outsource or where I try and get these clients is through all social media channels. So I have a look on Instagram's the main platform where I try and get people on board, and I try and go through all the small businesses that I can see. I try and see what their strategy is, how much they're posting, and just generally you can see quite clearly if they've got a plan in place. I've also done a bit of networking on LinkedIn, but if I'm honest, LinkedIn has I've just come across creepy people instead of actual businesses who want to work with you. So for me, I mainly use Facebook. Facebook groups are great as well to try and onboard people, as well as offering like free workshops and free live videos and trainings, because it gives you a little bit of insight. It gives your customer a little bit of insight into what you're doing and what you can do for them. So I think for me as a social media manager, it's really important to practice what I preach. So I try and find my clients on those social channels as much as possible.
Gotcha. Okay. Let's talk about, so if you're using those relationships, you're using social media in that way, getting these leads, what do you actually say when you're reaching out to someone that you think is a good fit, that you think would constitute as, we'll say, the perfect ideal pitch outreach material? So there's a lot of cold outreach out there. There's a lot of noise. You also don't want to come in trashing anyone's marketing presence, anything like that. What are the few things that you always include in that outreach that says like, hey, we're a good fit for you, this is why, that you think kind of works?
Yeah, so personally, I am not a fan of cold pitching. Because I'm a business coach as well, I prefer to get to know the people before I start pitching them, because I don't know if they're a right fit for me either. So as soon as I see them on Instagram, for instance, I will see someone who I might want to work with, and I will send them like a voice note or a message that just says, hi, how are you? I saw that you've been doing this recently. I really like um, your plan. And I introduce myself as well and just say a little bit about what I do. And usually by sending like a voice note to someone, you get a lot more responses from that, and they think that it's such a personal touch as well, because you're actually spending that time to message someone and record yourself and put yourself out there. So I always introduce myself and get to know them first and have a little bit of a conversation about what their business is and where they see themselves in the future. And then over the next few weeks, we start messaging each other, we start swapping numbers, we might have a little discussion, and I'll try and get them in to see like a free workshop or to join one of my live videos to get to know me a bit better. And then eventually I will build up to, might say something on their story about posting like a new product or something, and I'll reply to it, and I'll usually be like, oh, that's amazing. Like, if you need any help, feel free to reach out. I just want to be very, very genuine when it comes to getting clients. I don't like people who get in the DMs and start messaging and being like, I can do this for you, I can get you this many followers and this many sales, because I just don't think it's a genuine way to get clients. So yeah, I'd much rather build up a relationship over time, and I've managed to get quite a few clients in the long term who have bought products off me or buy one-on-one consultations with me, just because I've reached out to them, and they've kind of got it in their mind of, oh, she does that, she can do my social media. So yeah, it's just getting that brand recognition out there.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it's a really great call out as well for everyone to sort of be aware of, that promising any sort of KPI before you start having really in-depth conversations with them, and the nuances of the rest of their marketing, it's pretty much always going to be a red flag. Every team is different, every business is different. So that's a really great call out. So
can I pick up on that for a second, Anna? I just want to make a comment on that, because I think the one thing that we've heard from all of us so far is how important those relationships are, and how important integrity is, right? So you can, a lot of times, and I'm sure everybody on this call has experienced this, a client will come to you and say, this is what I need, but they might be wrong. We will never quote somebody on a list of deliverables that they call us and say, here's what I need. We say, well, let's have the conversation and figure out what you need, because you might not be spending your money in a good way. And I think what Veda is talking about right there is really beginning understanding your clients before you offer them any services. Because anybody who comes to me and says, I can do this for you, and they don't know anything about me, I don't trust them.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I think that's fair. So when you're starting those conversations, what is in your perfect outreach, email or message or whatever it is that you think is going to get them to talk to you?
Is that to me or Robert?
To Robert.
Oh, sorry.
So, I think that's a really good question, because it's not one that I think I can give you a good answer. I think we've been experimenting with that and trying to find that balance. We look in the outreach that we've been going with is really the call to action is let's have a conversation. Can I reach out to you? Because I think to Veda's point, it's it's beginning that conversation with somebody and understanding what their needs are and seeing if we are a good fit and seeing if we can help. But there's that tricky balance, and I'm not sure, it's a really, really difficult thing to find, even for people who spend their time marketing. It's, you know, even for your clients, it's a very, very difficult, to find it for a client is a very, very difficult balance.
Gotcha. Okay, I'll pass it off to Adam last for his outreach in starting these conversations with potential clients. What do you think needs to go in those messages?
I think this applies both to prospective new clients as well as existing clients if you're looking at upselling services. But the key things I coach my team on is, number one, don't forget that business at the end of the day is really just people. You know, the more personal you can be, the more likable you can be. People want to do business with people they enjoy. And as Robert said, people they trust. And so the more authentic, upfront, if you're doing outreach, do your homework on the person and on their company. And if you include a tidbit that you're from the same hometown or something about their college they went to, that just shows them you went the extra mile and you care. And they're not just someone on a list of 1,000 people that you're blasting outreach out to contact. Like you are kind of handpicking them, make them feel a little bit of that love. And then my very first boss is really focused on how are we going to make your life easier. You know, again, to Robert's point, don't focus on just the things they're asking, but come forward and be like, hey, I realize you're asking for these specific items, but the ultimate goal of what you're getting to is almost always more sales or increased business. And so like, that's what we're going to focus on. And we're going to take it off your mind of thinking through like, what specific tactical items do you need to do? Like, we're going to make your life easy. We're just going to tell you what our strong recommendation is based on our expertise and where we want to go with this, and try to make this as affordable and easy on you as we can. Anytime you take work off of someone, they're always excited and breathe a little easier, and you're gonna have them smiling at the end of the day. So keep it personal and set expectations and let them know how you're going to make their life easier.
Totally. Yeah, what's in it for me, I think is a good North Star to always be followed when you're reaching out to people. They want to know what's in it for them. They don't necessarily care so much about your life. What are you going to do for my life? Yep. So when you're sending these messages out, you know, there's kind of a credibility aspect of why should I even be reading this person's email or thinking about having this conversation with them that they're asking me to have. When you all were just starting out with your new business, what did you use to kind of bolster that credibility? You know, is it just mentioning previous companies you work for, or do you feel like your new agency or your new consulting business needs some sort of its own testimonial or work samples, and how you kind of scrounge those things up when you're brand new, your agency's brand new, you're brand new at this, and what you added to add that credibility to your outreach. So I'll ask Veda first for this one.
Yeah, sure. So for me, when I first started, I basically just used my CV for everything, and now I don't use my CV at all. I just use my skills and basically my like sales techniques. But at the start, I did use my previous experience, such as I was in marketing for so many years, and I worked on this campaign and I did this. But I also found it was really helpful when I was doing my own, working out my own core values and my business, that it was just easier for me to get testimonials. So I started free business coaching, and I started offering like phone calls, like just free 15-minute phone calls to just get those testimonials in. And something that really helped push me was the fact that in July I did a 6-week coaching program for small businesses, and I got one of my she's now my friend, I got one of my friends involved, and we had phone calls every week and accountability sessions, and she could message me whenever she needed something. And after that, she went from like having 2 sales a week in her business to 10 sales a week in her business. And then eventually she tripled her income. So when she wrote the testimonial for me, she didn't just go, oh, Veda is amazing, Veda did this for me. It was actually showing how many sales she got, what the outcome was. And I have to say that that's something that I put on my website and my socials all the time, because it's something that helped propel me forward and actually helped me believe in my business, which I think is really important to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I think especially since we've already talked about starting off your business with leveraging those relationships with people that you already know and in your network, those can be really great sources for testimonials. Even if they're short, if you get a few, you can always include those in outreach emails. I think that's a really great idea.
Yeah.
I'll bring it back around to Adam. When Odd Dog's starting off, or any of your consulting starting off, you didn't have any previous clients. What are you putting in there for credibility?
Well, an agency isn't any different from any business you might hire, right? So say you're looking to rebuild a fence in your yard, and you're going to talk to someone. You're going to ask, like, well, let me see a fence you built before, and let me talk to the neighbor that you built it for, make sure they had a good experience. And if the price is right, the fence looks good, and the customer says good things about them, you feel pretty comfortable moving forward. And marketing is no different. And so the one thing that we really recommend having is something that you can showcase to say, this is work that we've done before. And in a lot of cases, that is going to be your own business. So if you're doing social media consulting, have your own social media presence that's out there and work on building that up. If it's a website, have your own website that's there. Have something that you can reference people over to. If you're brand new, it can be your own. Once you do get the first few clients, work your tail off on those and make sure that they look as good as they possibly can, that the references are glowing, because those are your new pieces of credibility you get to point people to say, we did our own, we've done these first few projects, this is what they said about us, and that credibility is going to carry you forward.
Yeah, that's a huge call out, because there's one thing that I tend to see, it's marketing agencies concentrating on marketing for their clients and not for themselves. And that kind of starts to become more and more something that falls through the cracks a little bit as clients come on board. So super important to manage all your own social media, manage your website, and make sure that stuff is basically what you would want a portfolio to be. I think something that you guys have both talked about is customer testimonial, what customers are saying to you, things like that. Do you guys use reviews anywhere, or do you generally reach out to people and try to produce these types of things as content? I can kick it.
That's okay. For me, I use the reviews that I get as content basically, but I also do it to so for instance, I do monthly workshops and I always put some testimonials in near the end, just to show people what the outcome was for others after the workshops. So for me, I find that it's a really good way of using content, but I wouldn't personally go to someone and be like, oh, I got this person this many sales, blah blah blah. I just use it as a bit of a filler for my feed and then put it on the website.
Gotcha. Okay. Adam, do you do reviews, or do you ask these for testimonials, content, that sort of thing?
Reviews are massive. We recommend them. We prioritize them for clients. We built an app to try to make getting these reviews easier. Back to my fence example, that's, what did the neighbor say about working with this person building a fence? And that's a really big deal. So cultivating those, making sure they are authentic, that they are natural. People don't instantly think to do it, and so do ask, and don't feel bad about that. Oftentimes they'll want to, and they just need you to prompt them, and they're happy to jump in and lend a hand. In some cases, you need to drag people through it, and in some cases, I've written the testimonial and sent it to them and just said, hey, would love to get a testimonial. This is what we have in mind. How's this sound? And once they send approval back, then great, it's done. So you even take that workload off their chest, because it's just one more thing to do and one more thing they might not get around to, and so you can take a little control over that.
Yeah, I love that idea. It's not that they don't want to say good things about you, it's that they don't want to sit down and write it. So that's a really good shortcut. I want to bring this back around uh, to Robert, and when you started Curious Ant, obviously you have the good fortune of having a huge name, Oracle, that you're able to use as credibility. Before you had any paying clients or any sort of work samples, what are things that you added to add that credibility to your outreach?
I think it's actually a good question, and you know, when they first reached, my partners first reached out to me about building the agency, that was a big part of what my resistance was, is, you know, how are we going to build an agency without the actual work, right? And what we eventually came to was that the people that we brought in and the creatives, including myself, that we brought in, we all looked at our portfolios and said, what have we done before? And what can we contribute? Because, you know, and it had to be obviously work that we were heavily involved in, even if we weren't the only person on that team. So any project that we had led, any project that we had been part of that we felt we could own, we put on the website. Because without that, there wasn't anything, you know, for anybody to look at. And we've slowly replaced those things over time. But I think that was really what we looked at, was collectively, who were we and what had we done before we came here? So very similar, I think, to what Veda's saying about using her CV. We used our CVs. We used our previous portfolios to help generate that business.
I think a lot of people attending this they've probably been working in-house somewhere, and now they feel like they're ready to branch out on their own. So are there any friction or problems that you've experienced in that process of using things from your old in-house job to use as advertising for your new agency?
We were very careful how we did that. So for the most part, a lot of it came from projects we had all done as freelancers, not something we had done in another job. That said, we actually did include some of my previous Oracle work in there. We didn't have any friction with that at all. I was fortunate that when I left Oracle, the people who were still at Oracle, I had really good relationships with. And they really were encouraging me to go out on my own. So I didn't have any friction. I think that's an important piece there, is you don't want to do that and blindside wherever you came from, right? So, you know, you have to know what the relationship is with the people who you did the work for and how you could use it. Because you don't ever want to burn any bridges.
Right. Yeah, all the potential relationships there, especially as they move to new companies, I think would be a pretty steep price to pay for one testimonial, one work sample, for sure. Mm-hmm. So one thing that a lot of you guys talked about in finding these people, in doing this outreach, was whether you are generalists or not. And I wanted to kind of ask about that, and I'll also been here really quick just to remind everyone to start getting your questions into the question box, because we're going to move on to the Q&A quickly for the last little bit of this webinar. But I wanted to ask you guys, in whether you're a generalist or whether you're niching down into certain verticals, how do you handle it when you maybe are very far from being a subject matter expert in a certain vertical? You know nothing about lawyers, you know nothing about grocery stores, whatever, and how you handle those potentially mismatched expectations. We've heard some people say you just won't work with them. Do you say yes and figure it out later? Do you outsource things? What's your MO there? I'll kick this one off to Adam first.
Whatever it takes to get the job done is the right answer. We have done it both ways, where we're in overheads a little bit and it's fake it till you make it, and it's going to take a ton of work. And you might need to realize that you're going to lose money on this project with the amount of time it's going to take you to learn, to invest, and to, at the end of the day, still come out with a good outcome. but you have to be careful because you can easily get yourself into deeper water than you can handle, and you're going to need to know how to pull in an expert if you decide to go that route. We've gotten much better over the years at knowing like what projects can we step into where it might be a little outside our comfort zone, but we feel really confident we can deliver, and what projects do we just need to clean say no to because that's just a little bit too far outside our scope and we're not going to be able to deliver as well as a partner we could bring in on that project. And so I think that kind of goes back to setting expectations with clients and really being upfront about this is what we can do, this is where we're going to see success, and this is what we're willing to put our name behind. And if it's too far outside of the comfort zone, tread very carefully.
Definitely. Okay, Robert, what about you?
We've had a slightly different approach, although I agree with everything that Adam has said. We've actually turned that, I think, into our strength. So part of what we offer, and it's not that different than what a lot of agencies offer, but I think it's how we've marketed it, is the idea that we build bespoke teams for bespoke projects. So part of what we offer is the fact that our networks are so deep, and we've been doing this so long, that if we don't have the right person in that seat for that project, we will find that person and bring them on board. And we're very upfront with our clients about that. So, you know, for instance, we did a campaign, a terrestrial radio and streaming audio campaign for a small pizza chain in New York. And we hadn't done any restaurant work like that before. And we hadn't done any radio work like that before. But what we did was we brought on a writer and a team who had worked on Pizza Hut, who'd worked on a whole bunch of other pizza campaigns. They knew that part of the business. And we were upfront with that client. Like, we're going to find you the best writer for a pizza campaign that you're going to find, and you can trust us to vet that and manage it and take that off your plate. So that's how we've approached it. And so we don't make any secret about that. We're small but global. And that part of what you're buying into is the fact that we have a global network that we can reach out to find you the subject matter expert that you need.
I love that. And I love the call out that transparency is huge as you're talking through what these expectations may be. I think as long as they know what they're getting into when they sign the scope of work with you, then you're gonna have a lot less problems being in sync down the road for sure. I'll kick it off to Veda last. You've got mismatched expectations, maybe an industry you really know nothing about, or a channel that really isn't in your skill set. What do? Say yes and figure it out later, or you have some other way of solving that problem for the client?
So I think it might be a bit slightly different for me from Robert and Adam, because I don't know how big your business is, but for me, it's literally just me. So if I don't know something, I usually tell the client, because I'm quite a generalist. I've worked with restaurants and I've worked with real estate and finances and all of that. I'm quite generalist with it, but if there's something that I'm really like, whoa, I have completely no idea, I would take a step back. And I think the only thing that I would take a step back from is if they wanted extensive copy written, whereas most of mine are short snippets, like a tweet or an Instagram post. So for me, I usually tell the client that I will do it. I've done quite a lot of different projects and I usually figure it out.
Awesome. Okay, I'm going to switch us over to the Q&A. We've got a couple questions already. If you have more questions, throw them in there as we're chatting. So I'm going to read the first one. The first one is about deciding your pricing. And it says, how do you balance the fine line between charging what you feel is the right price and having clients say you're too expensive? Do you set your prices, or do you have various packages you offer clients? And at what point do you have to turn work down because it's just not worth it?
I'd say pricing, yeah, I'll jump in first here. Pricing is such an interesting tool. It can be used in so many different ways, and way more than what I thought up front. Up front, I thought pricing is about, let's make sure that we're charging a fair amount on this and that the client feels value out of it. Pricing can also be something that really helps you weed out some of the riffraff at the lower end of things, and be really careful when people start nitpicking on pricing really early in the game. They may continue to do that going forward. So raising your prices enough to where some people are saying like, it's a little too rich for my blood. Those are probably good ones to let go away. Be sure, A, you're covering your costs. if you know you're early stage and you're just trying to get projects under your belt so you have something to speak to, like I'd be a little more lenient on price, but again, pick the clients really well. Otherwise, like there's no specific rule to pricing. It's kind of like what you feel is right, what you feel is fair to the clients. I'd say start there, and then as you go, maybe you've got too much work on and you can't take much more right now. So raise your prices and keep that high so that you build yourself and buy yourself a little time. Pricing is such an interesting lever to help adjust your business, either bring in more or slow things down.
When someone says that to you, you're way too expensive, and you are really very sure that you're not being too expensive, do you have a magic phrase or two of how you handle that?
You get what you pay for is the easy one. If you're really looking for something too good to be true, and maybe you've got a bunch of emails, someone saying, we'll get you 5 #1 rankings for $10 a month, and like that's just too good to be true. It's not going to happen. So yeah, just letting clients know and feeling confident in your prices, letting them know this is fair, this is what the market rate is. Do some industry research in your market, a little competitive shopping if you need to, so that you can feel a little more confident in saying like, no, this is the price and what you need to pay. And any less than that, evaluate whether that's kind of project that's going to help you as a showcase piece going forward, or if that's just a troubled client that you need to identify earlier than later.
Yeah, totally. Okay, what about you, Veda? Deciding your pricing, making sure you're striking the balance between, keeping your lights on, not having people say you're too expensive, and how you decided on that.
Yeah, so I agree with Adam when it comes to weeding out the bad. I've been told many times that I'm too expensive, or it's not worth it, or etc. And you just know that they aren't the right customer for you. The right customer will pay for the transformation that they're getting. They're not just paying for this one thing, they're paying for you in general. And I think you really have to value yourself and your services in order to be able to price that's going to cover your costs. And also you've got to think, like, if this was a big business that they're going to, you wouldn't question it. We go to a supermarket, we don't question their prices. So why should you go to a freelancer or an agency and question their prices? Like, it doesn't make sense. So you have to be very, very firm with what your pricing is. And if they don't like it, then they can go elsewhere, but they won't get the same treatment.
Absolutely. And I would want everyone attending here to, remember the fact that even if you're just starting out, your time is still valuable. There isn't a, rough period of paying your dues or anything like that. I mean, there is to some extent, but your time is still valuable. You still need to be confident in your prices and do what you need to keep the lights on, for sure. We've heard that time and time again on this the series of webinars, is value your own time and it will pay off in the long run. So I love that call out. I'll kick this one off to Robert lastly about pricing, striking that balance, deciding on your pricing structure.
Yeah, I don't really have a whole lot to add, to what Adam and Veda said. I think they really covered it. I think one of the things you need to be really careful of, and I'm just thinking about something that happened to us recently that I can maybe share with people listening, is we were asked to bid on a particular project, and it was a big company, it was a big project, and we really went back and forth, and we came up with what we thought was a really fair price that was going to give us a decent margin, but not, and we got underbid drastically. And the project manager that I knew said, listen, we brought in 4 agencies, 3 agencies, all bid it within the same range. You guys were all right, within a few $1,000s of each other. But this other agency we worked with before, they came in at about 40% less than everybody else. And I can't compete with that. And that was the answer. The answer was, I'm sorry, I would love to, but I can't compete with that. The client went away, but they've since come back, right? And it wasn't where you get what you could pay for. The other agency, I think, did it as a loss given the pandemic. I think they had bodies and seats and it was survival money. But people will respect when you say, this is what I can do. and they'll respect you for doing that. And they'll come back with an understanding of what they need to pay. So don't be afraid of alienating that client because you can't match a price or you can't bring your price down, because a lot of times that client will still come back.
Awesome. I love that. And you slightly touched on what I think is probably going to be our last question, because this one is kind of a can of worms. But just in terms of COVID, the pandemic, someone wants to know what you guys are doing differently to make up for that COVID-related loss. And I'll let in here myself. I know a lot of in-person events and networking, even just meetings, have gone away. Is there anything you guys can point to that says, I used to do it this way, and now I have to do it this way? Or if you've had to engage in a little bit of that survival mode? I'd be really curious to know about that.
Yeah, I've changed my my outreach completely, and I've changed my business completely since the pandemic. So for me, I had one client at the start of the year, and I wasn't making an effort in my business, and I've got to be honest, I just was quite comfortable with where I was. Then obviously my client let me go because they basically went bankrupt and didn't have the money to pay me. So I went into panic mode and I was like, oh my God, don't know what I'm going to do now. I've lost the client. I'm going to have no money. But basically, I think that was probably the best thing to have happened to me, because it got me out of my comfort zone and it got me to pitch to new clients. And if that hadn't have happened, I wouldn't now be confident enough to do workshops and webinars and offer one-to-one consulting. So a year ago, I wouldn't have dreamed of coming onto this webinar and speaking about my services. But it's actually given me the confidence now to do that. So I think that as awful as this is, it's actually given me a kick up the bum to actually do something.
Love that. Okay, either one of you guys, before we wrap up, things that you've had to do differently during COVID?
For us, the big thing we've had to do differently is focus on our team. That's where we've noticed the impact the most. With clients, we've been able to say, no problem, you're a dentist and you're forced to shut down, we'll pause services. And building a business that's really diverse across a lot of clients has allowed us to do that and still sustain through the course of it. Where we've noticed it is in our team has such a tight-knit level of camaraderie that our team, as well as partners and people we work with, we've had to really focus on continuing to engage, keep things fun, keep things light, support our people through this however we can. And so, if you're a small company and just starting out, I'd say that's in all the other people you have in your network who may support you, other vendors, other experts. So utilize social media as well as you can through that to keep that conversation and that personal communication going. And remember that people are struggling through this, and you got to listen to what they're struggling with and help out where you can.
Completely.
I think,
yeah.
For us, I think we kind of started our business in the middle of a pandemic, right? We were 4 months open when everything started shutting down. So doing anything different, I can't answer that because we had really just started going. So I think the challenge that we've had, and I think you mentioned in-person events, a lot of the business that we had been nurturing and things that we had been talking about were, a lot of my network had come out of SaaS events, Salesforce, Open World, and a lot of the people that I'd worked with at Oracle had left to go to other companies, Zendesk and Dropbox and Google, who were all working on events, and that business went away. And so, we were working with them, how do we help you figure out how to replace that pipeline? How do you create an engaging experience that's virtual? And so as we were having those conversations, we were trying to figure out how we do that for ourselves. And I would say mixed success. But we've hosted a few happy hours, with clients and people that we might have met out and about. We might, it's all relationships, and different relationships require different things. But I think that's what we've really had to figure out how we replace those. Hey, let's meet for a drink. Hey, let's grab a lunch, have a cup of coffee. Because for us, as we've been saying throughout this whole thing, all sales is personal.
Yeah, awesome.
And how do
I love
you fix that?
Yeah. Okay, so we're 2 minutes over time, so thank you so much to our panelists for staying with me these extra few minutes. This webinar recording will be on the Traject YouTube channel for anyone that's looking for it, and the recap blog will be on the Fan Booster by Traject website next week, including the video. If you sign into this with your email address, that's the email address that this will all be sent out to as well. If you missed anything, you want to send it to anybody else who didn't get to attend, look for it in those places. I just want to say thank you so much once again to our 3 wonderful panelists for sharing these insights with us. And thanks everyone for attending as well. And we'll see you guys soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, Anna.
Thank you.